Welcome, everybody. I'm really enjoying the comments. I see that we're gathered here from literally all over the world, including some very early risers in some parts of the world. My name is Deborah. I'm living in North Carolina in the Appalachian Mountains. And I count myself very fortunate to be friend and family with Marianne and Aslanur. So I want to welcome you to this event. Happy spring, happy Nowruz, and happy book launch, which I have probably, like many of you, anticipated for a good while. I wanted to just give a short introduction about Marianne, and when he and I were talking last week, we exchanged some bullet points, and which is, a bullet point of even a little bit of Marianne's life was like, small font, lots and lots and lots of remarkable lines of remarkable qualities and things he's done. But in the middle of the night, I just went, just set that aside in favor of a stronger heart sharing that I want to express instead. I realized this is sort of the anniversary of meeting Marianne 5 years ago in Çeşme, Turkey. And he and I were part of a small group of really beautiful beings that were invited to what was then being framed as the Samorg School of Wisdom, a sort of exploration of a small group of us from all over the world. And we were sharing a house in Çeşme, and I knew a couple of the people, but probably most of the people I didn't know. And Marianne first came into my heartscape when we did a lot of circling up during that week, and he was sitting across from the circle from me. And he started to read Rumi in Farsi, in Persian. And I loved Rumi's poetry, but I had never heard it in Farsi. And there were a few other people from Iran who spoke Persian. But I knew that he was German. I knew that he could speak Turkish. I'd heard he could speak Hindu. I heard all these things, but I hadn't heard him speak Farsi. And Rumi penetrated my heart in an entirely different way. And I felt like it was also in the presence of a man who was treating language and the poetry of Rumi like an infant. And I sincerely mean that, like a treasured infant. And a few days later, he spoke of Aslanur, the beautiful Aslanur, who is his wife now, but was a girlfriend at the time. And there were some gifts on the Nowruz table that I had brought to give people. And he had picked a pair of earrings for her. She wasn't at the gathering. She was at another gathering elsewhere in Turkey. And when he spoke of her, I could feel just this immense amount of regard and respect for her as a girlfriend, as a woman, as a being in the world that also lodged deeply in my heart. And I feel this consistency of these sweet, respectful, vulnerable, courageous, just reverent qualities in Marianne that's continuing to weave. When I had the pleasure of reading his master's thesis on Rumi poetry in day-to-day life in Iran, in the way that he's co-created On Our Journeys, which is sacred journeys around the different sacred landscapes of Turkey or Anatolia with Aslanur, with his sacred journalism offering that's online, and also now this beautiful book. So what I really want to say is that wherever Marianne casts his gaze, it's done so with reverence, and that moves me clearly. And now he's sharing this journey with us through this beautiful, beautiful book. So welcome to here, and I now hand you over to the beautiful Marianne.
Thank you, Deborah, for this truly moving, beautiful introduction. Thank you for trashing my bullet points. I appreciate it. And yeah, I couldn't imagine, I think, a more beautiful way than opening a gathering with you. So it's a great joy to welcome all of you to this evening of sharing stories. And just as I was trying to center myself for this gathering and seeing all these names popping in, I just imagined for a moment how would it be if I was sitting in a room and you would all walk through the door one by one, coming from all these different countries. But Zoom really makes it possible. So gratitude for bringing us together. And also it's a special day because we are entering the year 1400 of the Persian calendar today. So it's Nowruz, and our Iranian and Kurdish friends are celebrating the new year. So I couldn't think of a better day to have this gathering than today. So before getting into the stories, I just want to give a round of thanks. Deborah, I already thanked you, but I also need to thank you for being the first editor of my book. You put so much attention, patience, and love, and it was a real pleasure to work on this together. The same goes to Annie, who's also here, who did the final round of edits with me, polishing my, my creation. And of course, also to Aslinur, my wife, first of all, for letting me set out on this journey in the middle of a pandemic, despite all the concerns. And thanks to her, I always had a stack of fresh masks and a bottle of Konya. You know, Konya is this Turkish alcohol-based perfume that got very popular during the pandemic. So I always had them in reach in my handlebar bag on the bicycle. So I just want to give you a little overview of the flow of this evening. I'll start with a few stories. I hope you can all hear me fine. And I would ask everyone else to please make sure that you are muted so that we don't have any disturbances midway. So we'll start with an hour of storytelling. And there will be also a few passages that I will read from the book. And at the end, there is a Q&A session, maybe about 20 minutes, just to also hear your voices, hear your sharings. So if anything, you know, pops up in the middle of the stories, just keep it in mind or note it down on the side. And in the end, there will be space for all of you. But for now, I just invite you to sit back, maybe take a deep breath. Make yourself receptive for this journey. I also need a deep breath, by the way, because I'm pretty excited. So Deborah has already told a few things about me, very generously. I want to add that I grew up in a very small and quite unspectacular town in northern Germany, with 2 churches, a few bakeries, but no cinema. And in my early 20s, I moved to Berlin to study. But actually, I spent more of my time traveling. Whenever there was a semester break, I would venture out. I would go out mainly to the Middle East, which was my early love. And also I began studying Persian and studying Sufism through the Persian language. And there was also another passion in my student days in Berlin, which was cycling. So sometimes I would cycle through half of the city to the university. Of course, we have wonderful cycling lanes in Berlin. And I remember one Ramadan Eve, I think it was July, the weather was pretty hot. And I had those moments when I was missing the Middle Eastern warmth and the flair that I get on my travels. So I got on my saddle and I cycled to the next mosque. And, you know, I was passing all these bars and the Berlin vibe, music in the streets, and it's a summer night, people are out. And I step into this mosque. It is a completely different space, cool air inside, very quiet. There's a slight scent of rose perfume in the air. I'm hearing Arabic and Turkish. And this feels like home. I moved to Istanbul in 2015. And now there were lots of mosques, a lot of Sufi friends, a lot of circles, but somehow the cycling was missing. You know, Istanbul, whoever of you has been to Istanbul, it's the city of hills, especially our neighborhood in Üsküdar, is basically an array of hills, and cycling is impossible. And whenever I would get on my bicycle, I would tell myself, "Pooh, I will never do that again." And also somehow we always ended up living on the 4th floor, so I always had to carry my bicycle up and down again. So that element was missing in the mix. So when I heard about the Sufi Trail, this 800-kilometer route, hiking and biking route, I felt like a small child on the eve of the sugar fest at the end of Ramadan. Because I knew, yes, I can combine my passion for cycling with my passion for Sufism and my interest in exploring sacred landscapes, of which Anatolia has so many. But I would not travel as a tourist. I would be a pilgrim. I wanted this journey to be mystical, transformative, something that would ideally change my life and which I could then write about. I would be a cycling dervish. So fast forward, finally, I'm ready to set off. I have adjusted the height of my saddle. I have fixed the handlebars into the right place. And I'm in love with my bicycle. It has this German steel frame, special technology, roll-off technology, gears in the hub. It's flat tire proof, so accidents are virtually impossible. And I'm getting onto the road. It's my first day of cycling. Very easy. I'm eating figs on the way. I'm taking in the countryside air, finally out of the big city. And I'm finding myself in the house of dear friends, Seda and Kamyar, who are also with us tonight, in a village near the city of Yalova. And it feels great to be with friends who also have a strong affinity to the Sufi path. And also hear Seda play the bağlama before I go to sleep. And she plays this song to me from the Bektashi tradition. Hayırlar feth olsun, şerler def olsun. May the good be with you. May the bad be kept away. So this lullaby somehow takes me and accompanies me on those first days of the journey. But still before sleeping, I think about the journey. What is lying ahead? Will I be able to make it all the way to Hatay, to the southernmost tip of Turkey, 1,500 kilometers? At least that's what I have put into my mind. And will my body be strong for all this? Will it be strong enough? I'm taking a moment to write down a few intentions into my diary. I know that the road will have challenges, but I want to learn to embrace them all. I want to welcome every experience as it comes, as an opportunity for growth. The next morning, I'm woken up by the sound of the rooster. I hit the road and I slowly pedal towards a road fork that is going up into the forest. I need to make it to the next village. I'm pedaling up and I choose the right path. But suddenly I find myself pedaling in sand, in deep sand. The sand gets deeper. The wheels begin to spin. Now I'm reading from my book. The wheels begin to spin. I get off the bike and I start doubting whether I took the right path. I switch on my GPS, and as my gut feeling already told me, it turns out that I'm on the wrong road. No worries. I get back in the saddle to roll down the hill, not wanting to lose any more time. But I have made a mistake. As the wheels of my bicycle swerve back and forth, I begin to lose control and head straight towards a ditch. If I pull the brakes now, I will probably fall off the bike. Not braking doesn't seem like a great idea either. So I try to brake only a little. My bicycle slides sideways. I fall off to the side and I land on my bottom. The entire content of my handlebar bag gets hurled into the sand. Slightly shocked and a bit shaky, I first collect myself and then my stuff. Luckily, I've gotten away with only a bruise and a graze on my left leg. I put up my bike, I brush off the dust, and I cautiously walk back towards the road fork. I realize that the second road is neatly asphalted. Isn't it clear that this is the road I was supposed to take? As I pedal up the other slope, I suddenly notice a goat herder on the roadside, his goats happily grazing inside a green thicket. Almost invisible between the scrubs, only the bells reveal the goats' whereabouts. Kolay gelsin, I call out, employing a Turkish phrase that translates as may it be easy, and is used to say hello or goodbye to someone who is working. I strike up a conversation with a young man wearing glasses and a cap. I ask him if he has been a goat herder for a long time. His name is Sezgin. And of all the places in Turkey, he comes from Hatay, the province that lies at the other side of Turkey, at the end of my pilgrimage. With astonishment, I ask Sezgin how on earth he ended up here in the north of Turkey. Oh, I lost my job in Hatay, he says. My brother-in-law has a farm in Yalova, and he asked me to work with him for a year. So I accepted. Now I'm taking care of his goats. Sezgin seems to be enjoying his new life as a goat herder. Hiking with animals for a living must be great, I say. He nods in agreement. When I tell him that I'm on a cycling tour to Hatay, his face drops in surprise. That's a long way. So I'm on my first real day of the tour. I have an accident, and the universe seems to be telling me, don't think you have everything under control. And then this goat herder comes up from Hatay, telling me, well, maybe you will make it to Hatay after all. You just got up, you brushed away the dust. So there seems to be the message, leave it to me. I will take you to Hatay. And then I realize, oh, last night I just asked for equanimity. I asked to embrace all the experiences. So if you ask for something like that, you will surely also get those challenges. So I cycled on. I felt elevated by that experience. Of course, what I didn't know was that this was only the beginning. And on that very same day, there would be a whole series of other challenges. But I don't want to spoil too much because maybe some of you want to read the book. So this anecdote is just, I think, a little starter to create a bridge for me to talk a little bit about the word pilgrimage. What does it mean to be on a pilgrimage? And what do I mean if I'm saying I'm on a bicycle pilgrimage? If we hear the word pilgrimage, it comes with a lot of religious connotations usually. You go on a pilgrimage to do penance, you fulfill a vow, you ask for something from God. And as most of you will know, in Islam, the pilgrimage or Hajj to Mecca is one of the 5 pillars of faith. So the question for me was, what is the inner spirit of pilgrimage? What is really the essence of that word? And for me, it all boils down on traveling with 2 ingredients, intention and attention. Intention for me is the question, why am I doing this? What is the heart of my journey? What do I need to leave behind, first of all, in order to step on this journey? And am I able to fully surrender to the path and really keep my intention, my initial motivation at the center of this journey and not get carried away by all the challenges and experiences? Attention is about changing the way we see things, changing the way we meet the experiences and recognizing the signs along the way. Because once our antennas are aligned, once we learn to see in that way, actually everything is speaking to us. We will realize that nothing is mute. Everything is speaking to us. So pilgrimage and sacred are not some aloof or holy terms. I would say that there are really essential qualities that we can develop in ourselves, even if we go on a journey as mundane as going to the supermarket. But most of us, me included, we are running on autopilot. So we don't really have that quality of intentionate attention all the time. But I think a pilgrimage really helps to train yourself. At least it helped me to train those qualities in myself. There is also something archetypal almost in the way in which pilgrimage mirrors the journey of the soul. Rumi has a beautiful verse which goes like this in Persian. Har kasi ke dur mond as asl khish, boz juyat ruzgar be wasl khish. It's at the beginning of the Masnavi. And it basically translates as whoever fell away from his essence or her essence is seeking to return to the day of union, is seeking that union. So it's something about the condition, the human condition, to desire to return to that state, to return home. So interestingly, what drives the pilgrimage is a desire to return home. But we first have to leave home, the physical home, the home that we have made up, the familiar home, in order to receive what the journey wants to give. And then in the end, again, return home, return after the road, return home and see what it is. Maybe home has changed. Maybe the definition of home has changed along the way. So the tradition of pilgrimage in Islam has a very central function. And in Anatolia, people used to walk. Of course, back in the day, you didn't have planes, you didn't have cars, so people would walk to Mecca. And they started from Üsküdar, which happens to be the area I'm living in Istanbul. And I would like to just share my screen with you to show you roughly the map, and just to give an idea of how this route looked like. So here you have Istanbul, you have the Bosporus, the Black Sea and the Marmara Sea. And people would cross Anatolia, moving towards the coast, and then into what is now Syria. Aleppo was a very important stop on that route. And then moving down towards Jerusalem, Sham, Damascus, and then down towards Jerusalem, Quds, and all the way further on towards Medina and then Mecca. The Sufi Trail that I cycled is roughly this part, going up to here. So I went from Istanbul in the far northwest of Turkey, down to what is the southernmost tip. And my route looks like this.
वो बना दो हमारे कितने बजे होगी अभी चाय दूंगा चाय के साथ खा लेंगे चाय कप चाय भी
Could I ask please everyone to
बगैर चेली का बना दो चलिए बाद में खा लेंगे बगैर चेली का बना दो
Okay, so here we have the route a little bit close up. So this is Istanbul. And then the first part, I went by ferry to Yalova, down towards Iznik. Eskişehir is another important point, a big city nowadays. Then further down, crossing the Sultan Mountains to Akşehir, which is in Konya province, then to Konya. And this is where the official Sufi Trail ends for now, Istanbul to Konya. So that's about 750 kilometers. That's what I cycled. And from Konya onwards, I cycled after a few days of break. I cycled onwards to Karaman, then down through the Taurus Mountains to the Mediterranean coast, Mersin, Adana, and then into Hatay. And Hatay is really this little tip reaching into Syria. So the majority of the population speaks Arabic, and it all has a very Middle Eastern flair. I felt very reminded of my first journey to Syria in 2009. So that's just to give you an idea of the route. And the Sufi Trail, that chunk of road from Istanbul to Konya, is part of a larger project that seeks to revive the route to Mecca. Little by little, of course, nowadays we have the war in Syria, unfortunately, so it's impossible to cross Syria at the moment. But it's something that is work in progress, and we are also, I'm also honored that the founders of the Sufi Trail are with us, Sedat and Idris. Maybe we'll hear their voices also at the end. And they started by actually opening a trail going from Vienna to Istanbul called the Sultan's Trail. So maybe some of you want to look that up also, the Sultan's Trail. And then we have the Sufi Trail connecting from Istanbul to Konya, and then from there, as we say, inshallah, it will continue southwards. So that route, of course, that has been long forgotten is being revived little by little. And in some places, of course, some changes had to be made to the route because, you know, highways were built or bridges disappeared. So you can't really fully reconstruct the ancient route that used to follow the inns, the caravanserais on the way, where the pilgrims would stop. But you have to adapt it to the modern conditions. But still there is a lot of that ancient feel on the road. And those of you, I think, who will read the book, will also get a taste, dhawq, as they say in Arabic, the taste in Sufism. It's very important, a taste, an experience of that. So the word Sufi has also come up a lot. And I also want to give a little footnote about that before we continue with the stories. Because it's always a question for myself, what does it actually mean to call yourself a dervish or a Sufi? So I have that word dervish in my title, Diary of a Cycling Dervish. But actually, if you look at the tradition, the spiritual tradition, Sufis are the ones who try to escape from all kinds of labels and names. Because usually, humans being humans, there is always an image or a pride or something attached to such a label. Yunus Emre, some of you might know, the famous 13th century Sufi poet from Anatolia. He has a beautiful poem called Dervishhood, Dervishlik, which I want to read to you. Just giving you a brief taste of the original in Turkish. I will read the first First verses in Turkish. Dervişlik der ki bana, sen derviş olamazsın. Gel, ne diyeyim sana, sen derviş olamazsın. Dervishhood tells me, you cannot become a dervish. So what can I tell you? You cannot become a dervish. A dervish needs a wounded heart and eyes full of tears. He needs to be as easygoing as a sheep. You can't be a dervish. He must be without hands when someone hits him. He must be tongueless when cursed. A dervish needs to be without any desire. You can't be a dervish. You make a lot of sounds with your tongue, meaningful things. You get angry about this, about that. You can't be a dervish. If it were all right to be angry on this path, Muhammad himself would have gotten angry. Because of your anger, you can't be a dervish. Unless you find a real path, unless you find a guide, unless truth grants you your portion, you can't be a dervish. Unless truth grants you your portion, you can't be a dervish. Therefore, Dervish Yunus, come, dive into the ocean now and then. Unless you dive into the ocean, you cannot be a dervish. So this is typical Yunus Emre. It's very simple language, but I think that the more you listen to it, the more you go into it, the more you discover in his words. And to be honest, just yesterday I had an upwelling of anger inside, which created some mayhem in my family. So I probably can't be a dervish. So although I use the word in my title, I just want to let you know that I take it with a grain of salt. Because the Sufis who used that name, many of them actually, they didn't live up to those values. And that's why Hafiz, for example, in his poetry, uses the words dervish and Sufi in a very negative way, criticizing the hypocrisy of his contemporaries. And on the other hand, lots of Sufis who actually lived like true Sufis, embodying values like kindness, humility, truthfulness, honesty, generosity, those Sufis, they didn't actually use the name. But now I would like you to meet someone from the Sufi Trail, someone I came across on my path who doesn't call himself a Sufi, but actually lives like one. That's what I felt. It's a story of Anatolian kindness and hospitality that I want to share with you. But before I share this story with you, I would like to invite my dear friend Seda to play a piece for us. And it's very meaningful because Seda also appears in my book with that very song. So we'll be listening to the Bektashi Nefes that I mentioned earlier. And the refrain translates as, may the good be with you and may the bad be repelled. So Seda, passing it on to you.
Yes, can you hear me now? Okay, hello. Hello, Marianne. Hello, friends. Yes, it was really lovely to host Marianne on his first night, very first night, as a pilgrim. And it was also interesting and surprise for us to live on this path of the Sufi Trail. Yes, so you came as the pilgrim and we hosted you, which really opened my heart that night. Especially actually when I was, yes, I played music and I of course love it. I love playing music for my friends as a prayer. But making your bed also made me so happy that night. I'm a person who really loves to make beds for guests. So, so yes. This prayer song is from Bektashi tradition. And actually for the last 1 year, I have been singing this song a lot. Actually, the first time I sang this for a group, it was in a global Zoom prayer and music night, and I had chosen this song because it's a prayer. And after actually that night, I think the next day, Marianne had written to me that they really loved this song and it really touched them. So it's very meaningful for me to play it for you now again. Yeah. Subhu şam ey gönül çekelim gülü akşamı. Subhu şam ey gönül çekelim gülü akşamı. Hayırlar feth olsun, şerler def olsun. Vakıtlar aşk olsun, şerler def olsun. Niyaz et muradın, Mevla'dan iste şahım. Niyaz et muradın, Mevla'dan iste şahım. Hayırlar feth olsun, şerler def olsun. Vakıtlar aşk olsun, şerler def olsun. Seher vaktinde sen durup duaya şahım. Seher vaktinde sen durup duaya şahım. El kaldırıp yüzün çevir Mevla'ya. El kaldırıp yüzün çevir Mevla'ya. Sıdk ile yalvar o gani Mevla'ya şahım. Sıdk ile yalvar o gani Mevla'ya şahım. Hayırlar feth olsun, şerler def olsun. Vakıtlar aşk olsun, şerler def olsun. Perişan fetheyle hayra dehanı şahım. Daima zikretsin zemanın daima zikretsin hakkı zemanın. Eşine baş koy, Hacı Bektaş'ın şahı. Eşine baş koy, Hacı Bektaş'ın şahı. Hayırlar feth olsun, şerler defolsun. Vakıtlar aşk olsun, şerler defolsun.
Thank you, Seda. Speaking is one thing, but then those tunes really, I think they transport something of the soul of Anatolia. So thank you for bringing that into our gathering. And thank you for making my bed that night.
You're welcome. You are most welcome.
Yes, so I would like to continue with a story, as I said. And it's a story about someone I met after a very adventurous night. I'm not going to go into details because I don't want to spoil it. Maybe some of you will read it in the book. But it's a sunny morning and I'm cycling against the wind somewhere in the province of Konya. You know, there's the city of Konya, but there's also the province of Konya. And the province of Konya is one of the largest provinces in Turkey, if not maybe the largest one, I'm not sure. But it has almost the size of Switzerland. And it is one of those moments where the road just seems to be getting longer and longer and longer. It seems I'm not making any progress. My eyes are continuously on the bike computer. I'm looking at my average speed. I'm looking how many kilometers I've already made and how many I have still in front of me. And still, again, I try to remember you are on a pilgrimage. Just enjoy the moment. And I found this practice for myself. Whenever this agitation comes up, I would just look down at my feet and somehow focus on my feet and look how they are moving. It's kind of a little bit like you get into a kind of a trance with that. Meter by meter by meter by meter. And sometimes it worked. And it's in that moment that I'm entering a new landscape. There are fields of wheat, birds flying up, suddenly some strawberry fields, workers, they are working, picking the strawberries. It's the harvest season. And there is a woman cooking food on a gas stove in a big wok. And steam is coming from the chai danluk, the chai kettle. And the workers are waving at me. I'm continuing a little further. And then I come to the beginning of a village called Bedeklar. And there is a young boy who is feeding hay to his donkey. And I will continue reading from here, from the book. I come across a young boy who is feeding hay to his donkey. I have a particular liking for donkeys because I see purity and surrender in their clear and teary eyes. Hey, the boy calls out to me. I stop my bicycle and he looks at me with slight suspicion. Is this your donkey? Yes, he responds, but his eyes are fixed on my bicycle. I also have one. Do you want to see it? Of course, I say. The boy, his name is Ismail Hakke, runs off and fetches his bike, presenting it proudly. His father just got it for him 2 months ago. Looks great, I say. Ismail Hakke smiles, and he is visibly proud to have won my approval. At this point, we are joined by his uncle, who is working in one of the fields. His name is Burhan, short for Burhaneddin. I can tell by his kind face that he has his heart in the right place. "Where are you going?" Burhan asks. When I tell him about my pilgrimage from Istanbul to Konya and to Hatay, he immediately invites me to have breakfast with his family, which I joyfully accept. Quickly, Burhan asks Ismail Hakke to pick some potatoes from the field and take them up to the kitchen where his wife will prepare a meal for us. "We don't let anyone pass without filling their stomach first," he says. "This is more important to us than the fear of a virus." Burhan tells me that this year's potato harvest had suffered due to vermin attacking the crop. He picks one of the ripe honeydew melons growing next to the potato field, slits it open with a pocket knife, and cuts out a piece for me. It is incredibly sweet and delicious. But then, by some curious turn, our conversation begins to move into deeper places. Burhan points at a tree growing solitarily in the middle of his potato field. "Look," he says, "this is a wild pear tree. At Allah's hands, this tree is growing by itself. We are not cutting it down because both humans and wild animals can benefit from it. For instance, if the fox comes and eats the pears, he won't go hungry. Although I gain less harvest by not using that piece of the field, I have done my best so this tree can continue to live." I'm quite impressed, and I commend him on his attitude. My philosophy is to treat every human with respect, no matter if Turkish or not, if they are Christian or Muslim or of any other faith. If a human being can master his ego, he can master anything, Burhan says. I am silent. I ask Burhan where he learned all these things. "Oh, I've read some things here and there." So after this encounter, we go up to the kitchen and we sit in the living room, and Burhan's wife, she has prepared the most delicious potato omelette. There is fresh village cheese, tomatoes, olives, chai, of course. Chai should never be missed at a Turkish breakfast. And it's one of the few moments actually where I'm invited into a home on this journey. And of course, due to the pandemic also in the villages, people are not easily accepting strangers, which doesn't make them less kind. I still had a lot of kind exchanges with people, but this was actually the first time I could really sit in a home around the table and have a breakfast with the family. And it made me reflect, or made me once again realize the value of this kind of kindness to strangers that is still existing in Turkey. Even in Istanbul, in our neighborhood Üsküdar, which you could call a conservative neighborhood in Istanbul, many people have kept that spirit of kindness alive. Whereas, of course, in other cities and other areas, it has largely become overridden with Western-style individualism. So meetings like this are really what makes a pilgrimage into a pilgrimage, I feel. It's really what brings joy and what stays in the memory, even more than the places I visited. When you read the book, you will find many other stories of these kind exchanges. People I would normally never have interacted with. For example, an operator of an excavator on a road construction site in Orhan Gazi. A farmer who is running a YouTube channel in the countryside of Eskişehir province, or just the simple man who is offering me walnuts near Akşehir on the roadside. So what is this word Anatolia? I think it's good maybe to get a feeling of this term that I like to use. Why am I using Anatolia and not Turkey? To me, and that is maybe more a feeling than anything scientific or anything factual, so-called, Anatolia evokes a certain lifestyle, a certain quality, a certain culture that cherishes kindness, cherishes multiplicity, diversity, and lives human values and puts the quest for self-knowledge into its center. And that's why, because of my image of Anatolia, I always like to distinguish it from the modern nation state, which we call Turkey. Of course, Anatolia is located in Turkey, but I feel that Anatolia is much more than anything that you can put within the borders of a nation state. Anatolia, the word comes from a Greek term, Anatole, which means the east or the sunrise land. And when you use the Turkish term for it, Anadolu, it also gains another meaning, which is full of mothers. So Ana is mother in Turkish, and Dolu means full. So it somehow hints also at the feminine nature, the feminine quality of this land, the receptivity, the receptive element being a feminine quality. Why is it receptive? Because it has been a cradle of civilizations to so many cultures for time immemorial. If we look at Göbekli Tepe, which is said to be the most ancient site of worship in the world, 11,000 years old, and we go through the centuries, and we come, for example, to the civilization of the Phrygians, 1,200 before Christ, which left very interesting rock temples and rock tombs, which I also visited on the pilgrimage. And there are some photos of that also in the book. Anatolia usually is called a mosaic of cultures, but I want to add another metaphor here, which comes from a very dear teacher that I value very much. And he says that actually, instead of calling it a mosaic, because mosaic, in mosaic you have pieces, colorful pieces put next to each other, but they are not really mingling with each other. They are all static pieces next to each other. So we shouldn't call Anatolia a mosaic, he says. Let's rather use the metaphor of Aşure. So those who have been to Turkey, who know Turkish culture, and the Turks among us, they know what Aşure is. Aşure is a very traditional Turkish dessert with lots of ingredients. So you can find white beans, chickpeas, wheat, rice, raisins, walnuts, pomegranate seeds. Sometimes people put other things into it, whatever they find in their kitchen cabinets. It's this curious mix of things, and of course a lot of sugar. And it is prepared in very big cauldrons on the fire. That's the traditional way. And those ingredients, they are kept together by a kind of jelly that, the more you cook, the more jelly-like it gets, together with the sugar, the sweetness. And that jelly combines all these ingredients, but each of the ingredients retains its unique flavor, its unique aroma without losing anything, without giving anything up. So there is a very tasty dynamism, a dialogue, something going on, but each element preserving its essential quality. So that when I first heard this metaphor, I just, wow, perfect. Like, as someone who's in love with language and poetry and metaphors, I immediately really appreciated this image. And I would say that Sufism is just one of those ingredients in the whole mix. But of course, we have so many more elements. speaking of modern Turkey, of course, we have the nation state. We had the adoption of nationalism as an ideology, following the European example. So I would say that this traditional mix of cultures and civilizations was also damaged by ideologies, by wars over the time. Wars and ideologies which are fundamentally built on assumptions about ourselves, our false identities, not on real self-knowledge. And those assumptions or those ideologies, they have, I think, endangered the lives of many minorities throughout Turkish history. And minorities or groups and diversity is also a theme that was accompanying me along the Sufi Trail. So if you go on the Sufi Trail, one of the first days, I think it's the second or third day, you have all these villages up in the hills between Yalova and Iznik, which were built by migrant communities. So you have people from the Caucasus, you have people from what is today Georgia, you have people from who are called Cherkess, Circassians, I think in English. And then as I moved down inland, coming to the province of Bilecik, there are areas that used to be heavily populated by Rums, by the Greek. And I also visited a deserted church. Unfortunately, that is in a total state of a destitute state, of crumbling, of a ruin, basically. So you always also experience kind of all these feelings at the same time. The beauty, the sacredness of the landscapes, the places, the mosques, the shrines that I visited, but also those places of trauma and of change, where you can see how time has left its mark. Nowadays, also the word Anadolu, Anatolia, to people in the cities of Western Turkey, in Istanbul or Izmir, kind of evokes an image of poverty, illiteracy, conservativeness, which is of course a very biased image. But there is also a fact to it that the migration to the cities has impoverished many of those landscapes, materially and also spiritually, as you say, in Turkish, maddi ve manevi, and leaving many of those villages mostly to old people. I want to read just a little passage from one of those villages and one of those scenes, which is very symbolic. The landscape this morning is so shrouded in mist that I can hardly see anything except my handlebars and the vague outline of some trees. Reaching a village named Uludere in the north of Eskişehir province, I take a break at the local tea house. A group of old men sit on the veranda sipping black tea from tulip glasses, talking about anything and everything. I can feel the slowness of their lives, the only excitement coming from the voice of a TV presenter. The men are curious about my tour, and I'm happy to answer their questions. A little footnote, probably this is the only excitement probably that I brought into that day. So they start asking all these questions, and I answer, no, I don't have children. Yes, I am cycling alone. No, my wife didn't want to join me. She wouldn't go on a bicycle tour like this. And no, I don't feel lonely. Yes, I can find my way. And on it goes. So we had that very sweet conversation. And one of the grandpas tells me how centuries ago their village used to be an important stop on the Silk Road. And that sometimes they still find those ancient artifacts under the soil of their fields. But the important trade routes have long moved elsewhere. Nowadays, there is little reason for young people to stay in a place like Uludere. Another man tells me, Dozens of men have migrated from here to Germany in the 60s. Now their children are all German. And I can hear a kind of melancholy in his voice. In fact, there seems to be no one in this village below the age of 60. Saying goodbye to the men, I pay 75 kurush for my tea, less than 10 cents, and I continue my way. So this is a little story from Uludere, and a fundamental realization for me also, having lived in Turkey since 2015, so for the last 6 years, that somehow transpired on this journey is really how much this land has been giving me in many ways. And it's sometimes very hard to explain to friends in Germany or in the US who see Turkey mostly through the lens of politics, which is what we get served in the media on a day-to-day basis. And it's mostly about polarization, about ego games. But what mostly happens is because that's the only thing that we see, that is the only way that we know, and that is the reality that we create in front of our eyes. So I've sometimes turned into this missionary who's going back home and telling all these stories from Turkey or from the Islamic world, stories that I feel are so much needed for our time, stories of kindness and stories of human warmth, stories of the sacred in those lands. So it is with gratitude for this land and for its people and for all the beings, all the people who have hosted me so generously on this journey that I would like to close my storytelling and invite Seda for another piece on the Bağlama. Seda, you know which one?
Yes, I know.
It is a piece, I would say, that very much fits to the Ashura image and to this, the diversity and the essential unity in the diversity. Maybe Seda, after the song, you want to translate it or translate a few lines.
Yes, just a second.
Or before, maybe.
I will just mute now. Yes. Actually, this song, again from Bektashi tradition, from a minstrel actually. In Anatolia, the minstrel musicians were quite common in the past. We still have them, but not so many, or they are not very well known today. From Aşık Hüdayi. So they were traveling from village to village with their bağlamas, and they were singing, playing music. They were also mostly writing their own poetry. So it's basically talking about that love is our common religion. Love is what we share. And this love actually makes the whole universe whirl, do the semah. Semah is the ritual movements in the tradition. So yes, I think this is enough as the translation. Bütün evren semah döner, aşkından güneşler yanar. Bütün evren semah döner, aşkından Aslına ermektir hüner, 5 vakitle avunmayız. Aslına ermektir hüner, 5 vakitle avunmayız. Canan bizim canımızdır, teni bizim tenimizdir. Canan bizim canımızdır, teni bizim tenimizdir. Sevgi bizim dinimizdir, başka dine inanmayız. Sevgi bizim dinimizdir, başka dine inanmayız. Hüdayim, hüdamız var, dost elinden bademiz var. Hüdayim, hüdamız var, dost elinden bademiz var. Muhabbetten kalamız var, ölüm ölüm biz ölmeyiz. Muhabbetten kalamız var, ölüm ölüm biz ölmeyiz.
Thank you again, Seda.
Thank you, Marian. I also actually remembered Ali Osman Amca when I was singing this because he loves this song. Ali Osman Amca is a very dear elder to us, whom actually we met through Asnur and Marian. And today, very surprisingly, I visited him from his window because he's quite old and protecting because of the conditions now. Spontaneously, I went to his window. He was on the other side of the window. I was singing from this side. So I wanted to also thank him for, for what he actually put in my heart with his being. Thank you.
Thank you for bringing him into the circle. Beautiful. Yeah. I would now like to just open the round and see if there are maybe any questions or sharings. Those who like can turn on their camera so that we can all see each other. And just feel free. I think the best thing will probably be if you use your virtual hands. So for those who are not familiar, including me, I have to check. I think you go on participants, which is at the bottom of the Zoom window, and then you will see the link, the list of participants, and you have this option to raise hand. Is that correct? Or otherwise, just maybe wave in your camera with your actual hand, and I'll try to catch you. So, yeah. Yes, so I see 2 virtual hands. Hussein Bhai.
Yes, Salam, Marian, good to see you again. I was going to ask you, about your experience on this trail. You mentioned that, you came across this very old church, which was in a decrepit state. Were there, in the past, as part of the Sufi tradition, an inclusion of people from various faiths as well?
Yes, for sure. I would say that what some people call the golden age of Sufism, when Yunus Emre, when Rumi Maulana Rumi, or Mevlana, as he's called in Turkey, when they were living in Anatolia. And by the way, they are only the two most well-known saints in a whole, a large group of saints, many of them coming from Khorasan, Central Asia, into Anatolia. So in those times, it was Konya, for example, where Rumi lived most of his life, was a highly cosmopolitan city, a city of diverse races and religions. So you had not only the Greek Orthodox Christians, you would also have Armenian Christians, I think even another group of Christians, you had Jews, and so all these groups basically not only coexisting, but also really, how would you say, pollinating, cross-pollinating, can't find a better word right now, really inspiring each other. And there is this story actually from Rumi's funeral when they carried him up through the streets in his coffin, and the Muslims were chanting their prayers, and then the Christians would read from the Bible to recite verses, and the Jews from their psalms, from the Torah. And at the end, the Sultan of that time, he called the Jews and the Christians to his court and asked them, why did you do that? Why did you join this procession? He was, after all, an Islamic scholar, an Islamic Sufi. So why did you do that? And it is said that those faith leaders, the Jews and the Christians, they said, we came and we prayed because he made Christ come alive for us. And he was the Christ of our age. So it is really, I think, at that level where those borders begin to blur. Not that everything becomes one, but as I said in the Ashura metaphor, everything is keeping its very distinct flavor, but from within each one, within his or her own tradition, comes to a broader understanding and comes to a broader sense of unity. Yeah, and that's certainly what has happened in Anatolia. Yeah. Long answer.
No, but
Keep myself shorter.
it's very important to know that, considering, as you said, what you hear, in the sort of politics now about Turkey, so this is very different from what is in everybody's awareness, that how inclusive this tradition of Sufism has been.
Absolutely, yeah. I mean, we live in very different times, and there are people who say that the golden age of Sufism has passed, and we're now in a time where, it's just it's not anymore. But then already in the year 1000, there was a famous Sufi who said, the year 1000, yeah, there was a famous Sufi who said, Sufism used to be a reality without a name, but now Sufism turned into a name without a reality. So there are always those people, I mean, always you can say it's not what it used to be. But I would say for those who really seek and who really want to find, they can still find it nowadays, even though it's much harder. I would say much more buried by all these layers of division, of antagonism, of prejudice that we are seeing so manifest in Turkey, but all over the world, basically. Yeah. Thank you.
Your book now widely available?
Yes. Thank you for asking. So I'm sharing the link here. It is available for download, for purchase and download on my website, which I'm sharing here.
Thank you.
And thank you for the questions, very important questions. Yeah. So I'm passing to Frederick and Elise from the Netherlands.
Hey, great to see you and everybody else. You can hear me now, right?
Yes.
Nice. At the beginning, you shared a little bit about the home that you came from in Germany, and that you now transferred to Turkey, and lived, I mean, in all kinds of different places, and that the pilgrimage for you is also related to finding or to return home. Now we live even across the whole world now in a situation where most people have to be home more than they used to be, like their physical stone home. Could you share a little bit about how that theme, how you now relate to that theme? I won't assume that you returned home, but maybe you have a different kind of perception of what home is.
Thank you for this philosophical question. I love it. Yeah, I think there are so many layers to it. You mentioned my home in Germany. I think one thing that happened to me living in Turkey was also viewing my own native land in a different light. Just through living here and then coming back, it's not only that I also got interested to learn about the spiritual traditions in my own home country, which exist, but which are much less accessible nowadays. Like, for example, Meister Eckhart was a great German Christian mystic. But also really realigning, I think, my perception of what family is, what family means, connecting to my own parents who are also here in the call. Good to see you. And my grandparents. So there is that element of home, which is physical home, away from home, then going out into the journey. I felt through the last days of the Sufi Trail, I had this strong desire to come back to my physical home. It was always like, it was really pulling me back from the trail. And it was also, I think, a fatigue from all the cycling. So I was really counting the days towards the end. And then, I mean, just the simple pleasures of being at home. I mean, we've all been at home for the last months, but when you're on the road, you really start missing the warm showers. You start missing the soft mattress. You start missing the luxury of being able to cook your own food. But then at a deeper level, of course, that journey to my inner home, or what is home, I mean, that's an ongoing quest. And I wouldn't say that I found it on this pilgrimage. And something I always had to face was my image of this journey, or my expectation of this journey, trying to turn it into something life-changing, something that would get me somewhere. So that when I come back, I have a story to tell. That was one of the motivations. Or I would feel like I'm a new Marian, a new person coming out of this. And that, of course, in itself is another another story that you start telling yourself, and actually takes you further away from home rather than closer to it. So yeah, that's a lot of thoughts, but I think it's a great question for all of us. Kami, I see your virtual hand.
Hi, Marianne. Thank you very much for a most interesting talk. Apologies, I missed the first 30 minutes. I had some urgent things to look after. My question to you, Marianne, is how do you distinguish, the act of traveling for the sake of, meeting new people and discovering lands versus, some purpose you have for, let's say, in your case, wanting to know more about Sufism? I mean, what was your main motivation? Was it Sufism that has driven you so far, or is it more around meeting or understanding more about the land and its cultures?
I would say, again, a great question. I would say it's a mix of all those things. There was certainly, I mean, I'm someone who was born with itchy feet, so I love traveling. I traveling for me is also a way to get out of my daily life and to just experience something new and have that, that adrenaline of new experiences all the time. There is a beauty in this, not knowing what comes the next minute. So there was certainly that element of adventure, of physical challenge. But then I mentioned that I think in the first 30 minutes, and I will also say that again, that my understanding of pilgrimage, or what I tried to cultivate, and it was always trial and failure and trial and failure, is that attitude of intention and attention. So intention, asking yourself, why are you taking this journey? What is really at the center of this journey, and keeping this alive throughout all those days and always returning to it. But also the element of attention, meaning how are you seeing, how are you meeting whatever comes along your way? What is your quality of attention? What is your seeing? How are you seeing the things, right? We have the word sight, seeing. So what is your sight actually? And then of course the Sufi element. That's something I've been drawn to for the past 10 years, and I've been immersing myself into. So I discovered a lot of places I had never heard of, and Anatolia, Turkey, is full of those places. Many of them unknown to most of the Turks in Turkey, in some very remote corners. And the beauty of this trail is really that it takes you to some of those places that you wouldn't get to otherwise. Yeah. Thank you for the question. And Kate, aloha to California.
Oh, it's so beautiful to see your faces, Marianne and Azano, and remembering our time in Ojai. I'm sitting here unraveling a ball of yarn, ball of wool, in listening to you, and it's. I'm thinking of this wool as your journey of having to get yourself out of very tight spots and circle back upon yourself. But I had a much more quotidian question, which was, I'm assuming that you had to be camping because for all sorts of reasons, especially the pandemic. And how was that for you? I'm sure that you've done a lot of camping in your time, but to have your food and dealing with this idea of not being able to be around people, what was the logistics of it like?
Yeah. Yes, I was well prepared. I had my tent with me, back on the rack of my bicycle, and I knew that probably because of the pandemic, which we are all undergoing, I wouldn't be hosted in people's homes, which was also the case. Otherwise, Turkey is a country where easily people can invite you spontaneously, also just stay the night with me, which didn't happen. But I had my tent, and I had also some challenges. I had a night where I almost got blown away with my tent in a hurricane, and in the end, I had to just pack up again and find a place in a village. And unfortunately, I found one. So, for those of you who are going to get the book, you will read that anecdote. I think it's one of the funny anecdotes. It was not funny when I was experiencing it, but looking back at it, it is. And then there were also times when I was just too tired of being in a tent. And there is this thing in Turkey called öğretmen evi. It is called the teacher's house. So it's a kind of a hostel, but for officials or state servants. So they can stay there. They are usually very basic places, but they also take other people, travelers, Sufis, and they have very low rates for their rooms. So I often stayed in those places, and a few times also I had dear friends hosting me. And another one here that I can see is Tuba from Konya. So also sending some gratitude to her for hosting me in Konya, just next to Rumi's mausoleum. Yeah, so that's kind of the logistics behind it. Thank you. If I see correctly, I can't see any more virtual hands. Are there any real physical hands going up? Yes. To my mom in Germany.
Yes, hello everybody. It's such a joy to see you all, and thank you so much for your talk. And what I would really have loved, I would have liked to see some more pictures of the just of your journey, of the beautiful landscapes, and get some impressions of that. But probably you have this in your electronic book also, right?
Yes, thank you for that, for creating that bridge. Indeed, it is in the ebook. So for those of you who want to get a copy, you will, I think there are 52 photos in the book. So yes,
They're
it's
beautiful because you really get another feeling of it if you can see the pictures as well.
Yeah, true.
Yeah.
I wanted to leave you all with your own imagination for tonight.
Okay.
and leave some incentive for getting the book in the end.
Sure. Okay, thank you.
Kuldeep in Gujarat, India. Good to see you, brother.
Hey, namaste.
Namaste.
I just want to say a big thank you to you and all of your friends who are attending this thing. I should be in bed usually at this time, but I stayed up and I'm so glad I got to see you, hear your story, like exploring my imagination about Sufism and experiencing, and like I think all those kind of things I felt so grateful for. And I've been like waiting to see you and catch up with you, but as we say, as we believe that things happen at the right time. So I think we all are like right now together, even virtually, but it feels so close to each other. And I just wanted to say a big thank you, brother, and all of you.
Thank you, Kuldeep. It's great to hear your voice. And Kuldeep was also one of those hosts on my travels, not on a bicycle, but when I was, I think, almost 11 years ago. He was one of my couch surfing hosts. So we've been friends ever since. So thank you for coming.
Oh, pleasure. Thank you.
Do we have any other sharings, questions? Yes, I see a virtual hand from Tuba. Tuba's.
Yes, me.
Okay.
Hi, Brian, Marianne. Thank you very much for this wonderful talk. I'm very happy to hear that you have such an experience in Turkey, which is my home country as well. My question is related more to your Sufi Trail, I mean. I'm curious to know more about maybe some more Sufi spots or Sufi tombs on your way, other than obviously Maulana. You stopped in Konya, as I saw it, so probably you visited the shrine. And except that one, did you also visit other Sufi tombs, and how did you relate to that? I'm curious about that. Thank you.
Thank you, Tuba. Yes, indeed. So actually the path is designed in a way that it takes you to wherever there is a tomb or a shrine or a mosque, it takes you there. So you get to a lot of small shrines, türbe as they are called in Turkish, which are not not even well known much across the borders of that village or that region. But some of those places really struck me as very, with a very special kind of taste. I used the word taste earlier. In Sufism, it's an important word. Experience or a special energy. Energy, we can say, maybe sounds a bit more new agey. Energy, and I would say one of the places that really touched me a lot was a shrine, very simple, quite big, close to the city of Eskişehir, so just after Eskişehir, belonging to a saint called Shuja Dinveli, who comes from the Alevi Bektashi tradition. And it is this beautiful complex of, it has a tomb, a mosque, it has a gem evi, which is the gathering place in that tradition. There is a very old mulberry tree in the middle, centuries old, and it's extremely well-kept place, but no one there. I was the only one visiting that place, and I heard that people just come usually on certain days or festivals. So there were many of these really gems and jewels on the trail that really touched my heart. I can just also, because you said you're also living in Turkey, I think for anyone also living in this country and knowing this country, I think it can be a very, very different way also to explore and reconnect, to the land. Thank you for the question. And I received a question in the chat. What about cycling in Turkey? So Aurelien is asking, I'm not sure if I'm pronouncing your name right. What about cycling in Turkey? What is the most challenging, the most difficult thing on a bike? The climb, the roads, the traffic? And I have heard that Istanbul was one of the worst cities on a bicycle. How did you manage to go out of it? Yeah, I also asked myself, how did I manage? Well, actually, it was quite easy because I used the ferry to Yalova. So I didn't actually cycle all the way out of Istanbul. Cycling in Turkey, there are no long distance bicycle routes as such. Well, you have in Izmir, I believe you have some routes that are part of the Eurovelo, the European bicycle network. But it's a very small amount compared to countries like the Netherlands or Germany, or France. So it's difficult in parts. The Sufi Trail, luckily, it goes from a lot of village roads, smaller roads, also quite some bumpy tracks going through the fields. Climbs were difficult, challenging at times. I really had points when I was questioning why I'm doing this. I could have also just have stayed at home with my wife on the couch. So I had quite a few moments like that. But then, you know what, as you say, what doesn't kill you makes you stronger. So I met those challenges and those moments. And I also cycled on highways because in some places you don't really have any other choice. So it would be impossible in Germany. But in Turkey, you just go on the side stripe and try to ditch the trucks, the speeding trucks. And that's of course not very pleasant to cycle on a highway, but sometimes that also you have to take with equanimity and of course caution. There is a raised hand from Dan.
Hello, everyone. Did you go through Kahraman outside of Konya by any chance?
Yes, I did.
It's very curious. Mevlana''s father is buried in his tomb in Konya, but also in Karaman is a turbe of Mevlana's parents. So is his father buried in both places, or is he just in Konya, or does anyone really know? I've tried to research that and haven't been able to find that out.
So his father is buried in the main mausoleum in Konya. It's his mother's tomb that is in Karaman. And it was, as far as I know, it was quite recently discovered. And it's located in a small enclosed shrine inside a mosque. And it was not open, unfortunately, due to Corona restrictions. But it was on my route. I visited it. And it was probably the only exciting thing about Karaman.
Yeah. Oh, well, I had a much more exciting time in Karaman. So.
Oh, wow. I think then we should listen to your stories.
No, Turkish Delight there is quite famous for very good reason. They have a very famous cevizli lokum that's really quite lovely. So
I should have known. Well, I need to go back then.
yeah, it's really quite light and wonderful. I also I was out looking at the walls in Karaman, and a man came up to me and asked me if I was German, and I answered in Turkish that I wasn't. He goes, "Oh, excuse me, I thought you were a foreigner. So sorry." So that was a highlight of my trip. So it's a wonder. That area around Konya is quite fascinating. So, did you go up over the hills to Karaman, or did you go through Onbir Kilise, or?
Well, I used the country road from Konya to Karaman, and then from there I actually had to cross the Taurus Mountains to get down to the coast. So that was probably the biggest challenge on my journey, getting through those mountains.
Imagine.
Yeah, but in the end it was easier than I thought. I mean, you sometimes you make it big in your mind, but in the end, once you're in it, you manage.
And may I give a big shout out to Sedat?
Yes, please. Well, I see the hand going like this, so I'm not sure if he's happy with the shout out. But again, saying that the founders of the Sufi Trail are with us, Iris and Sedat. So they are also, I think, very happy if you have more questions about this trail to answer them, maybe by email.
Maybe like this. Yeah. Hello.
Hello.
Yeah.
Again, hello. Nice to see you again. It's a long time that we have not seen each other.
Yeah, 14 years almost.
14 years, yes. Then I met in Saint Jean at the airport on my way to on my way to Santiago. And then I met him and he said, "Oh, I'm so lucky that someone who speaks the same language as I do." And it was in France and nobody spoke Turkish there. So after my Santiago trip, I don't know.
I thought all the way to Istanbul.
Yeah.
So this is how the trails got developed.
I'm so excited to be with you. So I don't know what to say.
Hello.
Hello.
Well, thank you for bringing also the story. I think we had a conversation about this, how the Sufi Trail actually came into being, and you told me about your journey on the path to Santiago, the Camino, and even Sedat and Iris, they created this Sufi Trail passport, which is kind of a inspired by the Camino, where you also get your stamps on the way when you stay in the hostels, in the inns. So I always had my passport with me, my Sufi Trail passport. And I saw a question from Meltem about the dogs. Yes, that's a very good question. It's also something I considered before setting off. And actually, Sedat from the Sufi Trail, I asked him this question, what to do if I meet dogs? And he gave me just one advice, and that advice was don't run. Because if you run, you will just spur on the dog's hunting instincts and they will come and chase you. So you better just stay calm. And I actually had an opportunity to put that into practice and see if it works. If it hadn't worked, I probably would have blamed Sedat for this. But it did work actually. So I was surrounded by a pack of maybe 8 dogs and barking at me. And I just got off my bicycle. I tried to stay calm as much as I could. And yeah, they barked for maybe 10, 15 minutes until they got tired. And then seeing that I wasn't impressed, they just slowly went their own way and I continued cycling. So maybe I was lucky, but that was the only experience I had. But surely you need to be prepared for such encounters. And of course, also you have a lot of shepherds with their dogs, and shepherd dogs tend to be very protective of their flock and suspicious towards strangers. So you need to know how to handle these situations. Yeah. Kuldeep, I can see you. There is still a hand. Are you still? No. Okay, then it wasn't. Just stayed there on the virtual realm. Yeah. So, oh, and I think there was one question about a physical copy of the book. Maybe this, I will just close with this. To say that for now there is only an ebook available. I plan to also create a printed copy. I have to still find a way to do that. I wanted to try self-publishing this book, which I did, and now it's available as an ebook. It is 60 pages, I believe. So if you have a good printer or access to a cheap copy store, you might even want to print it out yourself. But for those who really don't like reading on a screen, be in the loop, and you will hear from me. If it's okay for you, I will also add your email addresses to my mailing list, so you can hear once that becomes a reality. And also another offering that I just want to name is a video course on Sufism, the essentials of Sufism, based on my research and also on my travels with stories that I'm going to release, inshallah, in the next month. So yes, once you sign up for the mailing list, so once you're on that list, you will also receive news about that. So yeah, I think we had almost 2 hours together. If there is no more pressing question, I would just ask Seda maybe to play a last lullaby for us before at least the ones on the eastern shores in Turkey and India and Pakistan. I mean, your bedtime has already passed, but we Turks, I think it's bedtime, and Europeans maybe not yet. But Seda, can I ask for a lullaby to close our session?
Yes, thank you, Marian. Actually, for this last song, we had a talk with Marian before, and he had told me that it can be a song that I feel Right now, actually, what is coming to me is to sing something in Persian, because today is Nowruz, you also mentioned. Because actually, this is how I met Marian, this story of Persian music and Persian poetry. There was a Persian music workshop in Turkey. I was helping to organize, and Marian came to that workshop. That's how we met. We have also that common point in our friendship. And because today is Nowruz, this is my feeling now. But what to sing? Actually, I have a small little composition from the first 18 lines of Mesnevi, if you would like to hear as the closing. It's not completed, but in progress. Okay, I will just sing. بشنو از نی، بشنو از نی، چون حکایت می کند. بشنو از نی، بشنو از نی، چون حکایت می کند. از جدایی ها شکایت 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 می کند. که از نیستان تا مرا ببریدند. که از نیستان تا مرا ببریدند. در نفیرم، در نفیرم، در نفیرم مرد و زن نالیدند. در نفیرم، در نفیرم، در نفیرم در مرد و زن نالیدند. سینه خواهم شرخ از فراق، تا بگویم شرح درد اشتیاق. تا بگویم شرح درد اشتیاق. سینه خواهم شرح از فراق، تا بگویم شرح درد اشتیاق. تا بگویم شرح درد اشتیاق. هر کسی کو دور مانده از اصل خویش، هر کسی که دور مانده از اصل خویش، باز جویت روزگار وصل خویش. 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 Thank you, Maria, and thank you all. Have a good evening, have a good day. And Marian, I wish a very beautiful journey for your book and also for your other efforts on this path.
Thank you, Seda. Beautiful. And that last line actually is the line I quoted earlier. So whoever is far from the essence seeks to be reunited. So with that, I just leave you all into the evening, and I'm just pasting again the link of the website and also my email address into the chat. So if anything is still alive in you after the gathering, any more questions, any comments, any inspirations that came to you, I would be very happy to receive your emails, and hope to meet one day off Zoom as well. So have a good night and Happy New Year again.